Associate Artistic Director of the Old Globe. This is the Insight Seminar for All's Well That Ends Well. Woo! I would love to acknowledge Vicki and Carl Zeiger if they are here, and if they're not, we'll thank them. Thank you so much, Vicki and Carl, for continuing to support the Insight Seminars. So, yes, this gentleman here with the deep voice, well, what can I say? I brought this program because I didn't memorize his bio. We've now been great friends for many months, and I've heard many stories. So I could tell you, but I'm going to let him tell you some of his stories. I had the privilege of meeting PFJ, Peter Francis James, but we call him PFJ.
Saves a lot of ink.
In New York, and he was in a Broadway show at the time called Left of 10th, where, and I watched it, and I was so happy to watch it because I wanted to know about this guy who was going to direct Shakespeare for us. And how many characters did you play?
11 on stage. Yeah.
I mean, talk about transformation. You know, one of the things that when we're casting shows, most of you know I do a lot of casting for the Old Globe. And one of the things I look for, or rather the skills that I look for, is how much can an actor transform, you know, especially if they're being asked to play multiple characters, or if a character is vastly different from who they are. We are looking for that quality and that skill of being able to transform through voice, through physicality, what have you. And this man here, let me tell you, those characters were so distinctly unique and subtly different. The sort of mastery of physicality and voice, I mean, watch as he fiddles with the water bottle, was so astonishing. It was really demonstrative of many, many years in this field, and he is indeed an amazing artist. He's also an educator. He was a professor of Shakespeare at Yale School of Drama, the David Geffen School of Drama.
No, yes.
For many, many years.
20. They don't give you 20 years for murder. You know. So I left.
He has directed at Juilliard, at the Phoenix Theater. He's also, and I brought, like I said, I brought the bio here. I could just read them out loud, but he has so many acting credits. I mean, incredible credits. He also worked with Barry Edelstein when Barry was the associate director on...
Well, he was the assistant director when Kevin Kline both played Hamlet and directed it. If you're familiar with that play at all, you know that Hamlet has a lot of stage time. So not a lot of time to stand out and direct. So guess who directed that play? And which was an education about Kevin. Barry, how's it look? And Kevin, we should talk. And he'd run up the aisle. But he had an infallible eye for storytelling, you know. And I had known him before that, but that was a seminal experience in terms of I went, oh, this guy's going to really do something, you know.
Well, and Barry had, you know, when we were talking about who do we want to direct our Shakespeares next year, I mean, it was like the literal light bulb moment where he went, PFJ. And so then, you know, he called PFJ up, and what did he say to you?
He said, I'd like you to direct All's Well That Ends Well. What do you think? And I said, well, it's number 32 on my list of the 36. He said, no, it's a great play. And I said, look, man, I just, you know, it's one of those plays that simply escape because it's not oftenly done. You know, it's rarely done. And it just happened to be one of the plays that I had not been in. I had seen it half a dozen times. I was educated at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. That was my training. So the British do it more frequently just because they do all of Shakespeare more frequently. So I'd actually seen it several times and didn't care for it, you know. But I said to Barry, I'll reread it. You know, he goes, read it. No. And I took a really long time reading it. And I say the hardest thing in Shakespeare is approaching it, having the courage to approach these plays with ignorance. don't say you know it, say you don't. And really read as if you do not know it at all. And the play started to speak to me in a very different way than I had remembered productions of it, which tended to be a very sort of, and for a confined English reading of the play. And one of the things that struck me as I kept reading, I was reading one scene, which you'll see, particularly between the Countess and Helena, where the Countess has discovered that she is in love with her son. Anyway, and I'd always seen it as this very staid chess game kind of thing, rather heavy. Two women battling intellectually about. And the more I read the scene, I went, I know this scene, I know this scene. And then it just went boom. And it hit me because one of the things I noticed is the play is set in France, and I don't think Shakespeare accidentally sets plays in other countries. If he says France, it means something. If he says Italy, it means something. Romeo and Juliet are Italian, and the characters in this play are French who go then to Italy. And, sort of think of in terms of energy, Britain's a 4, France is a 6, Italy's an 8, and if he says Sicily, 11 and a half. And you have to pay attention to that. So I was looking at it, trying to find the French in it, which is not something an English writer, definitely of that period, just does casually. By the way, it's in France. We don't like France. We're at war with France, so they stole our France. So, I was, and it just popped in my, and I said, of course I've seen this scene before. It's Molière. And, wait till you see the actresses do it. They're superb, but also, and then my imagination caught fire in terms of what was going on in the play, and the role of women in the play, the role of women, period. So that thing, it is the hardest thing, is to really just say, I don't know, let me listen. One of the things I used to say at Yale for my kids was, thinking in terms of Romeo and Juliet, and they'd come up and they'd start to work on Juliet or Romeo, and I go, you're trying to make this person normal. I said, and then kind of a thing that my students have threw at me for 20 years after that was this PFJ quote of,
Yes.
No, is it, what was it? I'm trying to remember it now, but they're not like the other children. They're like us. And all of a sudden, there it is. So Romeo and Juliet begins with Romeo's parents saying to his cousin, have you seen him? Have you seen him? You don't say that about all kids. You don't go ask have you seen your cousin? Yeah, I saw, how was he? And you go, okay, Romeo's a little different. Everyone knows to be a little worried about him. Why? So, start there. Start with the ignorance of it. I'm talking about other plays, but this is Shakespeare in general, certainly in this play. Who you initially think people are is often not who they are. They're far more interesting. They're much crazier. They're not like the other children. They're like us. Normal is a social lie. And Shakespeare was all about exploding that lie of normalcy, that people were fantastically individual and yet had a common humanity. And when you're putting the parentheses there, which is, I think, the great thing about Shakespeare, is that on the one side, you have this spectacular individuality. And then the other end of the parenthesis is common humanity. Wow, do you have a massive canvas. I think of, there's a line in Troilus and Cressida where Ulysses says, and runs to these and these extremities. And that's Shakespeare. He really gets the extreme edges of being human. So everything in the middle gets covered. Don't play Shakespeare down the middle of the road, you'll get run over by traffic in both directions. It's that old one. But it really is true. Okay, she said, I know if I put a nickel in you, you'll give me 25 cents worth.
That's exactly it. But one of the things that when we were talking about the play, and I know you talked to Barry about this as well, you had said that this was a desk play. So you researched it and you learned. Tell us what you learned about this play.
Yeah, so I was looking, and I didn't know it that well. And if you read it, the text later on, see it first, then go read it. Well, no, I think it should be understandable. I think people in the 21st century should be able to walk in here not having read it and get it. That's my deep hope. Minor digression, when we were doing that Hamlet, the fellow playing Osric had two small children at the time, one 10 and, well, not that's 10 and 7. Saturday mornings they were allowed to watch cartoons or put in a tape, play a board game, but not wake up mom and dad. You know, and they could make cereal for themselves, but not wake up mom and dad. So at 10:30 in the morning, he came downstairs. Being an actor, I mean, he slept in, and his kids were sitting playing a board game. 7-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, and looking at a television. Remember VCRs? Yeah. So the VCR was going, not cartoons. And Kevin's Hamlet, the Hamlet we did, Barry and I and Kevin, was taped by great performances. We did
Kevin Kline,
Kevin Kline's Hamlet. I'm sorry. So Kevin Kline's Hamlet, great performance. It's really good if you want to look it up, but it's still there and it's still good. And they had that in the VCR. And they're playing a board game. Your move. Your move. You don't look at that. And he came down. He's watching from the stairs, and he comes in. He goes, "Is that Hamlet in there? Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. Was it just in there? We put it in. Okay. So you're what? We watch it sometimes. And do you understand what they're saying? It's in English, Dad. And what a lesson. What a lesson. You know, don't overcomplicate it, and, you know, let the people speak and people can hear it. You know, it takes 4 or 5 minutes for the ear to tune. And hey, like a kid, there are these big words occasionally that your parents say that you don't know what they mean, but man, you figure it out. You know what that meant. You know, later on, you know immediately what obnoxious means. You know, the first time it was obnoxious. Oh, I like that word. That's, you know. Anyway, so
the desk play.
Desk play. Yeah, to get back, the digress. Yeah. This is why it's good for me to work from a script. It was worth it, right? Because there's a lesson in there. Desk plays. So I'm reading along. First public performance was 1740. So he'd been dead 120 years when it was done. And if you read it, you'll see Lord F, Lord G in the characters. Lord E, F, G, Lord D, you know, a page, another page. Da-da-da. Later on, it's Captain Dumaine. And you go, wait a minute, it's Lord G. And well, he hadn't assigned names until he needed them. Then he needed to identify one of the lords as someone and the other lord as his brother in order to get something to work. This is a first draft of a play that I think it's a first draft of a play that went into the death, hence a problem play. He didn't then do it in rehearsal and before an audience where he would revise. There are, you know, 4 quarters of Hamlet, and then you get the folios and, you know, 7 different versions as he compiles this thing in the end that's 3.5 hours long. But this is, I think, a first pass at something. It's a play about, initially, unrequited love. And I said it made total sense to me that Shakespeare sat down. When do you write a play about unrequited love? Not in the best year of your life, you know? And so he writes it out because he's a writer and a great writer. So he writes it down. It's going all over the place, you know, and that's fine, you know, and it's emotional. It's this, it's that, it's highs and lows. He's tying 2 different stories together. Let's throw in the story of the coward soldier clown, you know, okay, fine, and all. But he's working through this, gets to the end of it, resolves it, puts it in a drawer. And do you go back to that, or do you just, as you get better, write Midsummer Night's Dream? You know, I think he moved on to a play that I think he got a lot out in this play. and then simply didn't go back to it because he was more interested in doing Lear and he was up and breathing again. So in a funny way, in a great way, in a hard way, our job is to finish the play. It's an unfinished play is really what it is, I think. And so really deciding where did he want to go, what were the real themes here, what's underneath. I've switched the order of a couple of scenes, which really makes certain things work. And he would have done that in time, he was a tinkerer. So yeah, fascinating to work on kind of a new Shakespeare script in a way. Yeah, everyone does something to it, but I don't know if I've done more or less or whatever, but very fascinating to work on a play that to me feels like it didn't go up on his company. He didn't put it on his actors. He was hearing who would play what, so he had that advantage because he knew he was writing to which actor would say the lines, and so he could have an oral sense of what it would be. But he didn't go, oh, that joke doesn't land. And he would have just fixed it, And so we're having to do that, what lands that joke, what does, Anyway, so that's it.
So not long after you said yes to Barry, you kind of wrestled over it, and then you said, yes, Barry, I will
finished
do it.
flogging myself.
I mean, you had said that you loved San Diego, and you have an aunt here, and, so you were like, hey, why not?
Yeah, no, I had visited here before, seen things here before. And yeah, no, I was totally up for it. But I didn't want to direct a play that I wasn't excited about. I could do it, that's fine, but you shouldn't do that to a cast. You should be going, I really want you to do this play. And I have a cast that is just tremendous. Talked a lot of old friends into, get on a plane, you can get on a plane. Yeah. Look, when you land, you're in San Diego. I didn't say anything about June gloom.
It's true.
Said, look at the postcards, man.
They're here for a little bit longer. They'll see the sun eventually.
Exactly.
But one of the things that then, shortly after that, when you did say yes, you and I had a conversation, and you'd started thinking about your vision for what this would look like, this storytelling. And you had a very imaginative palette to work from. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your visual concept for this show.
Yeah. One of the things was I felt that it was very strongly kind of a fairy tale. Had that sense of it, a certain dreamy quality to it, a certain waking up from a dream. The moment we wake up from a dream, you go, oh, that wasn't real, but it felt very real. One of those, and yet it had dark and strange things that happen. There are illogical juxtapositions in the play, but I've been kind of having to judge, no, I think he meant that. There's a kind of funny emotional thing that happens when this unexplained thing happens, as things do in life. You go, I had the weirdest experience. And you don't want to sand that down. It shouldn't be, I don't think he believed life was, experientially, I think for me it isn't, a smooth ride. Weird shit happens. And you go like, who was that? You go, I don't know. But I know. Okay. And he's got a character in this play called The Stranger, actually. And they argue, editors, was it Ostringer, which is sort of a guy in charge of hawks kind of thing, except there's absolutely no discussion of that in the play at all. And he just seems to walk into, and people go, hey, and he goes, yeah, I could help you, And he's just this, but, and they go, and one editor went, I think it was handwritten. He only wrote the name once, and he didn't write Ostringer. They were trying to make out what this smudge meant. And what he'd written was a stranger. And I went, oh, that really makes sense. We've all sat down next to somebody on a plane or in an airport or to the bus or church or wherever you are, and it's like, hi. And then about 3 minutes later, you really wish you hadn't said hi. But, or whatever, I'm just saying life has these wonderful random experiences. And I think one of them is in this play in kind of a beautiful way. also, one of the things that struck me strongly about the play was I am now of an age, and I have 7 nieces and 1 nephew, and my nieces went through several nicknames for me. I don't have children of my own, so they own me. My job is to be their uncle, And yeah, so I am known now as Uncle ATM. Oh yeah, it's a great job. It's beautiful. But, and so this thing, I would be like, well, I'm trying to, and they do this wonderful thing where they go, just give it to me. They're trying to be nice to me, just like, just give it to me. As I've been struggling for 5 minutes trying to, what is it? And they go, pip, 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 pip. Literally in 4 seconds, they hand it back with the thing done, and you're like, okay. So, and there's a lot in this play, I think, that is about generations. And so I thought, how do I help get that in front of the audience? So you'll see the set is kind of really fixed clouds that everybody's walking on, essentially. Kind of happens on clouds. It's there, but if you really look at it, you go, that's not substantial. This insubstantial pageant faded, And the other thing about it was generations feel longer, further apart than they are. So costume-wise, we're covering about 180 years, because I really wanted to push the feeling of what a generation feels like. And part of the way to hopefully get you to feel that was to make it visual. So there are characters who are sort of, late 1700s, all the way into the 20th century, depending on what's going on. But you kind of, we have, oh, yeah, that person's dressed in old stuff. And you go, that person's newer than that person. You go, these people are really new compared to the people. You go, I feel the generations. And I think that's very strong in the play, is the generational differences. The king is on stage about 3 seconds before he's totally complaining about the young generation. And it's, all of a sudden you're doing Bye Bye Birdie, And it's like, there it is. But so, yeah, I found that one of the really strong themes in the play. Was that there were these generational differences, where there was this dreamlike quality, and the different. He really goes through an extraordinary kind of thing about, the center of the play is a woman, and that is unusual. Not so unusual for Shakespeare, but still unusual, and in a comedy more so, So the role of women, how they operate, different shades of being, it's very looked at in this play, and so that was really fun.
And it was fun casting it with you, because I think, one of the privileges I have is I get to cast shows next to all the different directors that we bring to the Globe, and every director has a different way, or things that they're looking for are different from each other. And one of the things I'll say about you, PFJ, when we were in New York, auditioning actors, I think there's like a level, and I see it with Mary Lou, and it makes sense. Mary Lou plays the Countess, Mary Lou Rosado, and she's brilliant.
Mary Lou was in the first graduating class of Juilliard. She's playing the Countess. She's
kind of theater royalty.
Yeah.
I mean, she's amazing.
Among us, she's like the shit.
But one of the things that I felt really, I could tell was something that would strike you, or that would somehow resonate with you. It had to do with a kind of theatricality, and a kind of, it's interesting because Shakespeare affords an artist many ways to explore a character. There can be like a lot of intimacy. There can be a lot of sort of demonstrative passion, and I think that for us, that stage, that theater is so large, right? There's, as I have heard people at the Globe say, there's a lot of real estate on that stage, and you have to know how to use it. And so it demands a kind of facility from an actor to be able to fill that space and to be able to use that space that really serves the storytelling. And I could tell that that is also what you were looking for with your actors, because that's who we ended up with on the stage. But tell me more. I mean, you've been working as an educator, obviously, also. What qualities are you looking for in artists? I know it when I see it, but I'd love to hear you articulate it.
Well, you said the perfect word, artists. A friend of mine applied for and did not get the position of principal of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, but he was one of the directors when I was there. And I said, well, what was the process like? And he said, well, ultimately, you know, they had me in for an interview, and I sat there. And they said, so what's your vision? He says, well, day one. Now, this is about the middle 1980s. He said, I would put out, took in 20 students a year. I'd put out 20 video cameras, little, you know, camcorders. And now these are 20 actors coming to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art to learn stage. And he said, I'll say, all right, there's 20 cameras there. Take one each. The people here to show you how to use them. They'll let you know how to do that. Out there is London. It's 10:30 now. Come back at 4 o'clock with a film. A nice little film about anything. Ta-ra. Because I want them to know on day one that they're in charge of the art. What story do you want to tell? Start asking this right away and take complete responsibility for it. And I thought, oh man, that's what it. He said, because we're not here to train actors, we're here to instigate artists. And I went, that's what it's about. I want people who, when they're on stage, have a mission to connect with the people who are here. I don't want to see a good actor. I want to see a great artist. Someone who says, this is what I do. Can't wait to have you here, because actually what I do requires you to be here. I can't do it without an audience. A camera won't do it. Won't get the thing out of me that I really love doing. Camera may come in to get it, but I want to give it. And that's so, you know, artistry. But in this particular, I'm not just saying artistry. I'm saying someone who's an artist. That's what grabs me. Is someone who I feel has taken complete responsibility for what they're doing. And I go, great, we can talk. And one of the things I've said to the actors here, which kind of blew them away, as we were leaving the rehearsal room to come to the stage, I said, look, it's a collaborative art form and all of this. And, you know, the director decides a lot of things, but why I love the theater is because the actor has the final cut. What you do is what you do. I don't want anyone up here to do something I told them to do that they don't feel. Nothing worse than you not feeling it and giving it to the audience. I have to give you this. And believe me, the audience knows. Not that, but they feel that the trust has been broken. Because until that moment, you've only been giving them things you want to give them. And I said, so if there is something, if I can't persuade you or help you or convince you, I need you to do the thing that you believe is the truth as an artist in this moment. And I'll make it work within the context of what's going on. That's my job. But it's got to be a two-way street in that way. And ultimately, you have to feel everything you're doing as an artist is like, that's honest. This is what I'm doing. You know, can you imagine a painting where they go, I think she needs one more eye. Okay, you know, but that feeling is what an actor feels in that moment, and that mustn't be there. Yeah.
Do you feel like your experience as an actor has has informed your directing style?
Oh yeah, I mean completely. You know, back in the
Steal
day,
from the greats.
well, oh yeah, well certainly still. Oh man, yeah. As I say, I'm not part of a school of thought or anything else. What I am is part of a lineage. You know, everyone who I've worked with people before them. There are chains of stuff that have come down. You know, and acting is still, I mean, in theater anyway, a craft guild in which one of the great things about this place and the Shakespeare is that we have these MFA actors, and to watch them sort of perch along the back wall, literally on. There's sort of this counter that has all these cubby holes in it, but they're sitting there like blackbirds on a wire, watching these actors in their 70s now, and just going, and they are rock stars to them. They're like, do you see how she did that? How did she do that? How did she do that? Look at what he's doing. That, and that was it. There's also a generational transfer of knowledge, wealth, art. Anyway, so being in a company situation, somebody's acting, Molière wrote and acted and directed and the thing, I don't have the gift of writing, so, but these distinctions are much less, many of the cuts I've had to make in the play. I said to Arthur, who is playing LeFou, as an actor I worked with 35 years ago in New York, and known him since, and he's playing this wonderful part. When I first sent the script to him, I said, Arthur, I'm going to be looking for things to cut. He's like, okay, which is normally, actors hate cuts, my part. I'm not kidding. 36 hours later, the script came back to me, and he goes, hope you don't mind, I cut about 45 of my lines. It's really much. And you're just like, that's an artist. I know we have to shape this. Here's how I want to shape the part. And I was like, that's beautiful. That is so much more. Yeah, great. Let's go with that.
I do want to open it up to questions. I have one more question, though, to you, PFJ. You're actually quite in demand as an actor. I feel lucky that we got you here for the summer. So what do you feel like this is your next chapter is as a director? Do you feel like acting is still in your future too? Like, how are you going to balance the two?
Yeah, I would like to do more directing, much more directing. I was about to do 2 Shakespeare productions. I was about to open a Midsummer Night's Dream at the Kennedy Center, March 30th, 2020. Immediately followed by Twelfth Night at Juilliard in May 2020. And then as we came out of pandemic, I was offered like the first revival of Funny Girl. Do you want to play Ziegfeld? And I'm like, yeah. Are you kidding? Great. You mean you're doing really Funny Girl? Yeah, okay. And so, there were things that were offered me. So I just went back to work as an actor because that was the first stuff coming in. The timeline on committing to direct something is quite far out. And so that was another reason I didn't direct for a long time and taught instead Shakespeare at Yale, because that's something I could do while I acted. And if I committed to something a year down the line as a director, you're committed. I felt that very strongly. If you're committed, you're committed. And you don't want to pull out saying, hey, they just offered me Colin Powell and stuff happens, which I played, So, I tend to do real people like Thurgood Marshall, Barack Obama, Colin Powell, Florence Ziegfeld. He's a real guy. As a matter of fact, fascinating. I go in first day of rehearsal for Funny Girl. Michael Mayer, wonderful guy. But, I'm totally like classical actor dude or modern stuff or whatever, but not musicals. You don't want to pay to hear me sing. And but that's Michael Mayer wants you to be in Funny Girl. I said, doing what? He said, Ziegfeld. And I go, that I could do. So I walk in the first day and I said, Michael, I've been reading up on Ziegfeld. He goes, yeah, did you find anything interesting? And I said, yeah, did you know he's not a New Yorker? He says, oh, really? Where's he from? Poland, right? The shtetl. And I said, Chicago. He said, really? And I said, like me. And he said, oh, that's nice. And I said, and did you know he wasn't Jewish? And he said, what do you mean? Ziegfeld isn't Jewish? And I said, he was not Jewish. His mother was a German Catholic. He said, oh, you're kidding. I said, no, Michael, like mine. And he said, really? And I said, Michael, you got to get over this typecasting shit. Ruined him for about 4 minutes, yeah. But yeah, it's a balance. But I would like to do more directing, partly because I had really good directors that I've worked with over the years, from Peter Hall to Livia Chule to, Dan Sullivan. And there's a lot of information that gets passed when you direct that you have an obligation to pass. So, because you've received it, again, it's a lineage. It's a lineage.
We want you back. I know
That's
that much.
nice.
I know that much. So please raise your hand. We have a couple folks who have mics, and they can hand you a mic so you can speak into your question into the mic, please. Thank you.
And forgive my dress. I totally forgot we were doing this today. But this is what a director looks like in tech.
It's very artsy.
Very artsy.
Well, thank you both. It's always. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is a very controversial question, okay? There are a bunch of books out that say Shakespeare didn't really write all those plays, 36 plays or whatever. You've taught Shakespeare for how many years, 20 years or something at Yale? And I'm sure you've thought about this. But it seems like more and more books are coming out to say this one wrote this one wrote that, and gave it to Shakespeare, and then he produced it or directed it or whatever. I'd like to hear your thoughts about it.
I'm not sure. Who knows? But I can tell you this. I would not trade a single play to know the answer to any of those questions. The writing is the writing. And honestly, I think you can get about 6 lines, 8 lines, 10 lines an actor into anything, and they'll tell you if it's Shakespeare or not. I think he did. There is some, compositional sharing that went on. Fletcher Beaumont, throwing it across the fire. If the strongest argument in any of those that I've read that are considered to be his is maybe Two Noble Kinsmen as being a shared piece. But I don't much. I have a half-read book, not because I enjoy it, called, Shakespeare Was a Woman. So I'm enjoying reading that, But if you said, the Earl of Oxford thing, I also taught at summers at Oxford for a while. There's a great guy there who went to school at Oxford. He's absolutely convinced, that Shakespeare was really the 17th Earl of Oxford. Absolutely, had to be. And I said, yeah, but there's just that little thing that he's dead when 12 of the plays are then written. How do you... Well, no, someone had them in a drawer. And I said, you're telling me that a company of actors kept secret 12 plays? And I said, actors, a contemporary writer changes 4 lines. It's on the street 5 minutes later. I simply can't credit it, So, but that's me. But honestly, I just go, I can feel a singular mind at work there. If somebody's really good at imitating him, then maybe that happened. But I feel this very particular mind in the way it moves, in the way it uses theatricality, in the way its word usage is so unpredictable. And yet, I'll use a word that was used by Lenny Bernstein to describe Beethoven. When you hear it, it's not that it's good, it's that it's inevitable. There's an inevitability in his writing where you land on that word and you go, it couldn't go any, to be or not to be. And you just go, well, it had to go. It's simple, but no one else went there. And it could be anything, The thing is, they're just, again and again, he has this inevitability in his writing where your mind clicks right into the idea in this, you're on the same railroad tracks. There's no bang, I'm with his mind. And that's very hard to imitate. I've had to write little things to bridge and Shakespeare and other things, It is I've never written a line as inevitable as his. Decent, but not inevitable.
We have a question over there and then a question up here.
Whether thou dost profess thyself a knave or a fool. The fools in Shakespeare, and especially in this play, can you just maybe elaborate the importance? Because I always think the fool, I remember the fool the most in most of Shakespeare's plays.
You're going to remember this one.
I'm sure, but I just love his answer: a fool, sir, at a woman's service, and a knave in a man's. And throughout this play, I'm just wondering, did Shakespeare put the fool in there? Is it not just comic relief, but it's also for the essence of truth?
Very much so. There's a line the fool has in this. Is the Countess accuses him of being a knave, in kind of stronger language, frankly. And he says, I am a prophet. I'm not that, I'm a prophet. I speak truth. So he's always giving kind of truth to his fools, which was kind of their job, was to be the person who had the license to say the real thing. Again, kind of this idea, again, of approaching something with ignorance. I remember George Orwell, Eric Blair, but George Orwell writing about writing and saying, mistrust any phrase when writing. It's a great essay he wrote, Politics in the English Language. Mistrust any phrase that's familiar to you when you're writing to describe something. You're not seeing it. Look again. Oh, now write what you see, not the convenient phrase. It was a very nice meeting. No, it wasn't. It was a complicated, a bit weird, with then a very friendly departure meeting. But it wasn't nice. I think that's, anyway, that kind of attention to honest. Jimmy Baldwin said a great thing in a short essay called Why I Stopped Hating Shakespeare.
It's in the program.
Oh, great. Oh, it is? Yay. Who did that?
Danielle.
Danielle. Yeah, well, I love it. Thank you, Danielle. Oh, that's so great. I've been busy with other things. But he said, I'm going to mess it up because Jimmy's kind of saying, but Shakespeare walked down the street and tried not to lie about what he saw. And I think that's the function of the fool in his plays. Is somebody who walks down the street and tries not to lie. Maybe not tell the truth, but tries not to lie about what he saw. There's wonderful, I'll just say, my mother, she goes, okay? And there's a thing in the play where he says, she is my mother well? She is not well. And you will see that come to life in this play, I assure you. Because he's seeing what's really there. Great. Anyway.
And we have a question up here.
So my sister's doing a sort of theater camp thing about Shakespeare and the plays like...
It's not too late to save her. Do you love your sister? She's 8?
She's 8.
It's too late.
It's not an actual Shakespeare play. It's like a Shakespeare 101. It's called Shakespeare Unshackled. And I've helped cast and sort of block some of the scenes. And
good for you.
Is there any part of Ben Jonson or Shakespeare traits or attributes that you would suggest for playing those characters by 8 through 10-year-olds?
Such a good question.
Have you worked with children in Shakespeare?
Have you seen my company?
Now.
I mean, no. I mean, one of the other things is artists, but in whom the child is still alive. That's the truth. They're all we all admit to it. One of my favorite things is that I'll be directing and I'll turn back, the MFAs are there. So you're the MFAs. I'm working up here, and I turn back to the MFAs and I go, and a couple of the actors will just be doing something brilliant and hilarious, but completely spinning out of control, And I come back and I go, this is what happens because they put me in charge. But there is children have a natural anarchy, which is really necessary to being an artist. I mean, in terms of, not censoring yourself, all of it. So they have a lot of the things that an actor tries to hang on to. Also, they make believe. My least favorite phrase in all of theatrical scholarship is the suspension of disbelief. Audiences do not suspend disbelief. They don't come in disbelieving, saying, I know that's not real. Now I'm going to suspend the fact that I know it's not real. What it is a conspiracy of imagination. Kids have a simpler phrase for it, make believe. Let's pretend. And everybody knows that, and everybody wants to do it. And a kid, all you have to do is not turn that off. The two words, let's pretend. Let's pretend. That's it. What are we doing? Pretending. It's not about being real, it's about pretending. And we have this capacity to pretend, which I think is actually the great human quality. We can pretend there's a bridge there when there isn't. That's how you build a bridge. You have to imagine it. A great ape will drag a tree branch into a river to try and get across it, to create a bridge. But they won't build a bridge. They can use what's there, but they can't imagine what isn't there. It's also the great human failing. You can believe in alternative facts because we have the capacity to. It is our greatest strength, and it is our greatest failing. It is an incredible power, and I think Shakespeare was totally into the fact that it's the most powerful thing going on, and that it actually creates a commonality, the human mind, that is, just unsurpassed in what being a human being is. An audience does a thing that is unlike individuals. It becomes a thing which may be the height of what human beings can be, which is all imagining together. That can get very frightening, too. You can have that happening at Nuremberg, under torches. Or you can have it happen out here, under a beautiful San Diego sky. But it's the same human power to actually invest in what we know isn't there. And man, that lifts the spirit in a very particular way. It can be frightening, or it can be unbelievably elevating.
Yes, indeed. Well, I will say that I wish we had time for another question. We do not, unfortunately, but I will say that what you just described, just that elevated experience, that is what is happening out there. So thank you. Thank you, PFJ. And thank you, everyone, for coming in tonight. Enjoy the show.